I'm just not the kind of guy that, well, brown nose. I say what I think I should say, what I think I feel, what I think I could sleep with.
I never will forget Eddie. I love Eddie, but Eddie was kind of stiff.
Eddie Kendricks died in 1992, but even 25 years later, his name remained tied to rumors, feuds, and painful truths his children later confirmed.
Jesus, even nothing in respect of thee.
As a Temptations founder, his falsetto shaped soul music. Yet behind the fame, he battled Berry Gordy over money, clashed with Otis Williams after the group's diss track Superstar, and carried grief from Paul Williams' suspicious death and David Ruffin's downfall.
Yeah, Paul Williams. Right. He's the only one that's missing at this point. Other than that, we are just about the same.
These betrayals and heartbreaks haunted him until the end. This story uncovers the rise, conflicts, and lasting truths. When people talk about the Temptations, most remember the sharp suits, smooth choreography, and timeless songs.
They dressed better than anybody else, they danced better than anybody else, they sung better than anybody else, so there you have it, the Temptations.
But inside the machine of Motown Records, not everyone felt like they belonged. Eddie Kendricks was one of those people. Quiet, creative, and deeply connected to soulful roots, he often found himself clashing with the most powerful man in Detroit music, Berry Gordy. In one rare interview, Kendricks admitted plainly, "Berry G is a man I do not know. I just know he didn't particularly care for me. I'm not the kind of guy that brown knows. I say what I think."
I'm just not the kind of guy that, well, brown nose. I say what I think I should say, what I think I feel, what I think I could sleep with.
These words painted a picture of an artist who refused to play the industry game. Where other Motown stars accepted Gordy's strict rules and smiling politics, Kendricks drew a line. He wanted respect for his ideas, not just for his voice. Motown was a hit factory, and Berry Gordy ran it like a business empire. Every song, every dance step, and every album cover had to meet his standard of what would sell to the widest audience. For Kendricks, this approach stripped away the rawness he loved in music. He wanted the Temptations to dive deeper into their gospel and soul roots, but Gordy demanded pop polish and a radio-friendly sound. Over time, Kendricks grew more frustrated, watching his artistic vision pushed aside.
I'd rather not have anything at all if I have to go that route, especially when I have a talent. I don't think I deserve to have to yes man everything you say.
This clash wasn't just personal, it was professional. Gordy had favorites inside the Temptations, and Eddie was not one of them. Otis Williams and others in the group often worked more closely with Motown management, while Kendricks felt like an outsider in decisions about recording sessions and song choices. He could deliver soaring falsetto on classics like Just My Imagination. But when it came time to decide the group's future, his voice didn't carry the same weight behind the scenes. The tension spread beyond the studio walls. Kendricks' refusal to bend made him appear difficult to Motown executives, even though fans adored his sound.
I never will forget Eddie. I love Eddie, but Eddie was kind of stiff.
Gordy, always watching his business first, wanted order and obedience. Eddie, soft-spoken but firm, gave neither. The quiet war between the two shaped much of Kendricks' time with the group. By the early 1970s, cracks had begun to show. Kendricks felt Motown was more interested in chasing the next big hit than letting the Temptations explore the music they truly wanted to create. In his mind, it wasn't just about songs, it was about respect. Gordy had built an empire on artists like Eddie, yet Eddie himself believed he was never given fair treatment within that empire. Looking back, this rift with Berry Gordy was one of the earliest seeds of Eddie Kendricks' exit from the Temptations. It wasn't a sudden decision, but years of bottled-up frustration. Kendricks had the voice that lifted some of the group's biggest records, but inside Motown, he felt like a man unheard. This silent battle with Gordy marked the beginning of his long road of conflicts, betrayals, and disappointments that followed him long after the music stopped. Behind the polished image of the Temptations, there were strong personalities that didn't always mix. Eddie Kendricks was known for his soft voice and quiet nature, but in the middle of the group stood David Ruffin, bold, confident, and often larger than life. The contrast between the two men shaped much of the tension that followed the group off stage.
But there were some differences business-wise, and at that time, things just could not be smoothed out.
Ruffin joined the Temptations in 1964, just as they were breaking into the national spotlight. His gritty, emotional delivery powered songs, like My Girl, and turned him into one of Motown's brightest stars. But with fame came ego. Ruffin liked the spotlight, and he wasn't afraid to demand it. Kendricks, on the other hand, preferred a balance, with each member contributing equally. The clash was inevitable.
Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis. There is only one David Ruffin. We should call the group David Ruffin and the Temptations.
Kendricks later admitted that other members had stronger personalities than him, and he often felt overlooked. In rehearsals, Ruffin's confidence sometimes spilled into arrogance. He wanted his voice out front, and he pushed for more lead parts. For Eddie, this meant fewer opportunities to shape the sound he loved. In one telling moment, Kendricks described how disagreements over who would sing lead could drag on, souring the group's chemistry. It wasn't only Ruffin. Other members like Otis Williams often sided with management or prioritized keeping Motown happy. Eddie saw this as a betrayal of what the group had started. 5 men from Detroit working together as equals. Instead, decisions were increasingly made with business in mind. Kendrick's ideas for songs and arrangements were sidelined, while Ruffin and others carried more weight in the room.
Were you kind of the godfather of the group? You were the one, because you were the founder. I mean, were you the one that cracked the whip and said...
Johnny Mae Matthews put that yoke on my back a long time ago. It wasn't anything that I said, hey, I'm going to be the leader. It was a thing when she would call a meeting, I would always be there.
The conflicts weren't just creative, they were personal. Ruffin's wild lifestyle of women, drugs, and late arrivals to shows frustrated Eddie and the others who wanted to keep their reputation clean. Kendricks, a man of quiet discipline, often clashed with Ruffin's recklessness. By the late 1960s, arguments became frequent. Tempers flared during tours and recording sessions, leaving cracks in the group's unity. One of the deepest cuts for Kendricks was the sense that his loyalty was never returned. He had been there since the beginning, shaping the Temptations' sound with his falsetto on classics like Just My Imagination. Yet inside the group, he felt like an outsider. As Ruffin's star power grew, Eddie's frustrations grew louder. He wanted respect, not just as a singer, but as a creative force, and he wasn't getting it. By the time Ruffin was fired from the group in 1968 for his erratic behavior, the damage was already done.
Hey, my question is to Otis. Why was David Ruffin fired from the Temptations?
The atmosphere inside the Temptations had shifted. Eddie had seen firsthand how fame and management favoritism could turn friends into rivals. Even with Ruffin gone, the bitterness lingered. Kendricks still carried the weight of feeling ignored, misunderstood, and trapped in a group that no longer felt like home. This chapter of conflict set the stage for what came next. Eddie's decision to leave the Temptations altogether. What began as small arguments in the studio would soon explode into one of the most shocking exits in Motown history. By the early 1970s, Eddie Kendricks had reached his breaking point. Years of frustration with Motown's strict control and clashes inside the Temptations had taken their toll. He had carried some of the group's biggest hits with his falsetto, yet he felt pushed aside when it came to decision-making. For Eddie, it was no longer just about the music, it was about respect. And in 1971, he made the choice to walk away.
What it was like back then, you left the group.
The decision didn't come suddenly. Kendricks had been unhappy for a long time. He had argued with Motown over the group's direction, saying the label cared more about hits than about soul. He had clashed with David Ruffin, and struggled with feeling ignored by the rest of the members. By the time Just My Imagination Running Away With Me hit #1 in 1971, Eddie already knew it would be his last major moment with the group. That same year, he officially quit the Temptations.
Each day through my window, I watch her as she passes by.
For Motown, the exit of one of the group's founding voices was a serious blow. But instead of letting the split rest quietly, the label and the group made a move that shocked fans. Later that year, the Temptations released the single Superstar, Remember How You Got Where You Are. The song, written by Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong, carried a direct jab at Eddie Kendricks and David Ruffin. Lines like, "Remember how you got where you are. Don't forget the ones who helped you get there," made the target clear. It was a diss track in the middle of Motown's golden era. The release marked a turning point. Fans who had admired the Temptations as a united front were now witnessing open hostility. For Eddie, the song was salt in the wound. He had given nearly a decade of his life to the group, only to be attacked once he stepped away. The bitterness between him and the remaining members deepened, leaving little chance for reconciliation. Despite the drama, Eddie refused to fade into the background. He signed a solo deal with Tamla, a Motown subsidiary, and quickly proved he could succeed on his own. His first album, All By Myself, came out in 1971, but it was his second project that made waves. In 1973, Kendricks scored a massive hit with Keep On Truckin', which reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The success was proof that he didn't need the Temptations to carry a career,
leaving Eddie in ruins. The victory of Keep On Truckin' was followed by 7 R&B smashes, including Boogie Down, Son of Sagittarius.
Still, the shadow of the split never went away. Every interview, every stage appearance carried the question of what really happened between Eddie and the group. The diss track, the fights, and the bitterness all became part of the story. While fans danced to his solo hits, Eddie privately carried the sting of betrayal. The Temptations had once been his brothers, but now they were rivals, and the scars of that separation would never fully heal. The break from the Temptations was more than just an exit from a band. It was the moment Eddie Kendricks stepped into his own, while also cementing the beginning of the group's darkest controversies. The split proved that even at the height of Motown's success, the music often came second to ego, power, and pride. In the summer of 1973, tragedy struck the Temptations in a way that would forever shadow their story. Paul Williams, one of the group's original members and Eddie Kendricks' close friend, was found dead in a car in Detroit. The official ruling was suicide. But almost immediately, questions were raised. Questions that have never gone away. Williams had been struggling in the years leading up to his death. He battled alcoholism, marital problems, and health issues that forced him to step back from the group. The Temptations had been his life since their early days as teenagers, singing on Detroit street corners. But by the early 70s, he was watching from the sidelines as the group carried on without him. Friends described him as depressed and overwhelmed, yet many who knew him also insisted he wasn't the kind of man to give up so easily. On August 17, 1973, Paul's body was discovered in an alley inside a parked car. The official police report claimed he had shot himself in the head, but the details never added up. The gun was found in his right hand, yet the bullet wound was on the left side of his head. Even more troubling, investigators discovered the gun had been fired twice. For family members and fans, these inconsistencies sparked immediate suspicion of foul play. Eddie Kendricks was devastated. His wife, Mary Agnes Williams, and his children were heartbroken. He had 5 children with his wife. He had shared countless nights on tour buses and stage rehearsals with Paul. They had started the Temptations together, chasing the dream of making music that would outlast them all. To lose him under such murky circumstances was a crushing blow. For Eddie, it was another reminder that behind the fame and the glory, life inside the Temptations was far darker than it appeared. The shockwaves spread through the Motown world. Fans wanted answers, but Motown stayed largely silent, letting the official suicide ruling stand. For many, it was easier to accept the simple explanation than to dig into the possibility of something more sinister. But those close to Paul never stopped asking questions. Why were there 2 shots? Why the inconsistency in how the gun was found? Why were there no deeper investigations? Officially ruled a suicide, the story never quite added up. Missing evidence, suspicious details, and lingering questions have kept the mystery alive for decades. Was it really suicide? Or something far more sinister? Eddie carried these questions with him. By this point, he was already out of the group and carving his own path. But Paul's death brought back all the old wounds, the betrayals, the arguments, the feeling that the Temptations' story was cursed. In later years, Kendricks admitted that the group was never the same after Paul was gone. The bond they had built in their early days had been broken, not just by business and egos, but by death. To this day, Paul Williams' death remains one of Motown's great mysteries. The official record says suicide, but the rumors and suspicions continue to linger. For Eddie Kendricks, it was a haunting reminder that even legends weren't protected from tragedy.
Paul Williams. He's the only one that's missing at this point. Other than that, we are just about the same.
The music played on, but the dark cloud of Paul's death never lifted, and it followed the group for the rest of their careers. By the late 1980s, the legacy of the Temptations had already been marked by tragedy. David Ruffin, once the group's electrifying lead voice, had fallen deep into addiction. What had started as a promising solo career after his firing from the group in 1968 soon spiraled out of control. Drugs, missed shows, and brushes with the law overshadowed his talent. For Eddie Kendricks, watching Ruffin's decline was painful. They had clashed in the past, but they had also shared years of success and brotherhood.
What we did, we merged the 2 groups, and then we found David, and that was it. That's how we got together as Temps.
Ruffin's troubles were no secret. He was arrested multiple times on drug-related charges and had a reputation for being unreliable on stage. Yet despite his demons, his voice never lost its power. Fans still lined up to see him, and when he performed, he could remind the world of the brilliance that had made him famous. But outside the spotlight, his life was in chaos. Friends recalled how he would disappear for days, consumed by cocaine binges. Each time he tried to pull himself together, the drugs dragged him back.
Most recent memory of David Ruffin, in court, facing cocaine charges, defended as a broken drug addict so out of control that court orders, friends, not even the threat of jail could keep him in a drug treatment program.
In 1991, Ruffin's story came to a tragic end. After returning from a trip to Philadelphia, he collapsed and died of a cocaine overdose at the age of 50. News of his death shook the music world. For Eddie Kendricks, it was more than just the loss of a former bandmate. It was the loss of a man he had once considered a brother, despite all their conflicts. Eddie attended Ruffin's funeral in Philadelphia, joining other members of the Temptations to say goodbye. But the grief was mixed with bitterness. Some family members accused Motown of failing to truly support Ruffin in his darkest times. Eddie himself was not free from struggle. Around the same period, he was facing serious health issues of his own. Years of heavy smoking had caught up with him. In 1989, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Doctors urged him to stop performing, but Eddie refused to give up the stage. He continued touring, even undergoing surgery to remove one of his lungs. Audiences noticed his weakened voice and frail frame, but his determination to keep singing earned him deep respect. In 1989 and 1990, Ruffin, Kendricks and fellow former Temptation Dennis Edwards attempted a reunion tour. The shows drew big crowds, reminding fans of the magic of the old Motown days. But the backstage reality was far more complicated. Ruffin's addictions made the tour difficult, and Eddie's illness left him exhausted. What was meant to be a triumphant return often turned into a struggle to simply make it through the set list each night.
You left the group for a while. Have you thought about the contrast between then and now?
By the time of Ruffin's death in 1991, Eddie's own time was running out. He was battling cancer quietly, rarely speaking publicly about the severity of his condition. Those close to him later revealed that he carried the weight of regret. Regret about leaving the Temptations, about the fights, about the friendships that fame had torn apart. For Eddie, the passing of David Ruffin was both a warning and a mirror of the pain he was already living through. The Temptations were once the face of Motown perfection, but by the early 1990s, the group's story was soaked in loss. With Ruffin gone and Eddie gravely ill, the golden voices of Motown were fading one by one, leaving only memories of the sound that had once ruled the world. By the early 1990s, Eddie Kendricks' health had sharply declined. After decades of smoking, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. In 1989, doctors removed one of his lungs in an attempt to stop the disease from spreading. Even after the surgery, Eddie continued to perform, but each show became harder. Audiences could see how frail he had become. His once effortless falsetto now carried the weight of pain. Still, he refused to completely step away from the music that had defined his life. On October 5, 1992, Eddie Kendricks died in Birmingham, Alabama, at the age of 52. His passing came just 1 year after the death of David Ruffin, making the loss even more devastating for fans of the Temptations.
Hollywood is also mourning the death of singer Eddie Kendrick. He died yesterday of lung cancer.
At his funeral, former group members gathered to honor him, including Otis Williams and Melvin Franklin. Smokey Robinson delivered the eulogy, speaking about Eddie's unmatched voice and his impact on soul music. Yet beneath the tributes, there was still an air of unfinished business, the wounds of old disputes and the bitterness Eddie had carried to the very end. In the years following his death, Eddie's children began to speak publicly about his struggles. They confirmed what many had long suspected. Eddie never fully forgave Motown or some of his former bandmates for the way he was treated. His children explained that their father felt betrayed, not only by Berry Gordy's coldness, but also by the Temptations themselves, who he believed had turned their backs on him after he left the group. According to them, Eddie carried deep hurt about the diss track, Superstar, Remember How You Got Where You Are, which he saw as a cruel attack from men he once called brothers. They also confirmed the toll of the music industry on Eddie's life, the constant touring, the pressures of Motown's machine, and the emotional scars from Paul Williams' suspicious death and Ruffin's downfall weighed heavily on him. His family revealed that Eddie often spoke of regret. Regret for the friendships broken, regret for trusting people who didn't truly have his back, and regret that the Temptations' story, once so bright, had become clouded by pain and tragedy. These revelations from his children brought new light to the rumors that had followed Eddie for decades. The whispers that he left the group bitter, that he died feeling abandoned, that he was never given the respect he deserved. All of them were confirmed by the people who knew him best. To fans, it was heartbreaking validation. The voice that had given life to hits like Just My Imagination and The Way You Do the Things You Do had spent his final years burdened by disappointment. Eddie Kendricks' legacy remains complicated. He was one of the greatest falsetto singers in soul history, a founding member of one of Motown's most legendary groups. Yet, his story is tied to conflict, betrayal, and tragedy. His children's words did not erase the pain, but they gave fans the truth. And for those who still play his records today, That truth echoes as loudly as the music itself.